All right, here we go. We're going live. All right, let's get a good banner up here, a great banner. All right. Well, we're going to let people join in here. We'll just let people filter in. Hi, I'm Anthony Parent of IRSMedic, and I was just talking with our long-term guests, John Richardson and Keith Redman, about today's topic. We're going to be talking about the world's most famous U.S. expat, Pope Leo XIV, and we're going to be going over his tax problems. And then, because this just came out, we're going to talk about the Republican House bill, the one big beautiful bull, and that was a typo, but I think I'm going to keep that there. I meant to put bill, but the bull I think is actually a little bit more appropriate if you actually take a look into that. So that's how we're going to talk about today. So it's an amazing thing, because I was mentioning it to John and Keith before we got going. I really think that, the stories that we have here, we have an incredibly famous expat, and now the Republicans are presented a bill that's supposed to solve some of these problems. And of course, in true Washington, D.C. problem, it only adds to the problem. The tax code is will be much more complicated if this bull actually passes. So we're going to get into Pope Leo. And by the way, I want to know if there's any other Catholics on this podcast. Now, John and Keith, you guys don't have a little bit Catholic in you? Are you at all?
Yeah, I'm Catholic.
All right. We'll go over some doctrine that are fantastic. So, any Catholics, just chime in what you think about this, or anyone really, but we're curious too. Then now just one little thing I was thinking about, though, because we're going to get to the FBAR and Pope Leo. We're going to be talking about the FBAR, report of financial accounts, but something that just sort of popped in my mind. I was like, oh, right, he might have signatory on these bank accounts, right? The Vatican might have bank accounts. I assume the Vatican has bank accounts. We're told about the Vatican Bank. Lots of money in there. And I was thinking about this. I said, Keith, I said, a lot of people don't know this. My dad forgets about this part of the catechism too. He often forgets this part of the catechism because it's so much a part of our daily life and of modern life. But the fact is, this Jesus was 100% against usury.
Right.
100%, right?
Yep.
That is the lending of money and interest. And so I was thinking to myself, well, there's a Vatican Bank. What does it do?
Well, over the top interest.
Well, no, any usury. That's where
any usury. Okay.
If you actually read it, it's any usury Jesus against. Now this shocks people that actually is, but that's actually the truth. So that's just something we'll get into. So I think we're getting enough people going. We're going to get yeah, exactly. Yeah, Gabe. Yeah, thank you, Gabe. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks. Yeah, you're not a Catholic, right? But you want to watch it. 1.3 billion people follow the church, right? And Protestants tend to react to it. That's the word, protest. What are you protesting? Well, you're protesting us because. Well, anyway, we'll move on. So I want to welcome John and Keith. Yeah, Keith, thanks so much for joining us. And John, how are you doing today?
All's good.
All is good. All right, great. Well, we'll get into it. So we are going to be talking about the Pope, and we have first U.S. Pope, right? Born in Chicago, I guess, right?
Yes.
So now the burdens of being a U.S. person overseas erupt. So Keith, why don't you take us, because you deal with people one-on-one going through this trauma of discovering, hey, look, I'm a U.S. person overseas. I might have some financial things overseas. What's going on here? So what would a fish out of water, someone new to this channel, doesn't understand the horrors of citizenship-based taxation. How would you sort of hey, this is what's going on here. This is why people are so concerned. What would you say to them?
Well, I think the first thing I want to say is preface what I'm going to say is, why is this coming up now? Because he has lived outside the United States in Peru as well. Well, the reason why it's coming up now is because he's now Pope. So it is a lot more interest on the situation with U.S. taxation. So he is a U.S. citizen. He's living at the Vatican. So he is subjected, and I don't know salary or anything about him as far as money or that he has in the U.S. or not. Who knows? But nevertheless, he's subjected to worldwide taxation because the U.S. imposes its tax code outside the U.S. on tax residents of other countries. So if he's a tax resident of the Vatican, he's also a tax resident of the United States. So that means he needs to file his U.S. tax declarations each year. Number one. Number two, if he is, as Pope, has signatory authority on any accounts at the Vatican, he needs to do a foreign bank account reporting in FBAR if he has a signatory authority. So that to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in the United States. So that means it opens up the books of the Vatican to the U.S., to the IRS. Also, he would be a U.S. person if he has a bank account in regards to FATCA. That would have to be sent to the IRS as well. And the Vatican and the U.S. do have an intergovernmental agreement when it comes to FATCA. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And this is not knowing, what he has in his financial portfolio, if he indeed has a financial portfolio, because being an Augustine, they take a vow of poverty. So who knows? But it does
right.
bring it to the forefront, the problem with the U.S. tax system.
But we don't know Pope Leo the 14th's financial. We're going to make some educated guess and give some possibilities.
And he's a dual national. He's a dual national. Peru and the U.S.
And so now, John, as thank you for that wonderful explanation of the problem, Keith. That was very well done. Now, I want to turn the question over to John, because Keith was talking something there. He said 3 words in a row, and it just made me think like that term doesn't really exist, and I think that term is what would greatly confuse anyone who's listening and uses the English language to communicate. And this is the phrase U.S. tax resident. John, that word doesn't seem to mean anything to me. Do you see why? Do you see why that was like, well,
it's the word. It's the word resident. It's the
right.
Resident that's bothering you. That's
right.
I mean, the beauty of American citizenship, and there's no other country that is like this. Showing the superiority of the U.S. tax system is that it doesn't matter where you live or if you even live anywhere. You're subject to the full force of U.S. taxation, and to the extent that you are not resident in the United States and you have non-U.S. source income, not only are you subject to the full force of U.S. taxation, but the full force is far more punitive taxation than if you had the same financial profile in the United States. So the bottom line is that the U.S. tax code hates its citizens, no matter where they live, but hates the ones who are not resident of the United States even more.
Right there, and there is, and I think, thank you, John. That was beautiful. And here it is, like the question. I don't think anyone should ever ask you, "Are you a U.S. tax resident?" Because I think a lot of people are like, well, no, I'm living overseas. The question that should be asked: Are you a U.S. person for tax purposes?
No. The question that should be asked is, are you a non-resident alien? That's the gold standard in the 21st century.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so John's pointing out the fact that the U.S. tax system is so egocentric. It calls people who aren't U.S. tax persons non-resident aliens. And so that's what we've talked about that a lot, and how the actually tax code allows the IRS to impose taxation on non-resident aliens, no matter where in the world they are as well. They just haven't done that yet. Haven't done it yet. I'm saying,
absolutely right. I mean, Section 1 of the Internal Revenue Code says every individual is subject to the U.S. tax code. And the thing about the Pope and that, I began to think, is God an individual?
Well, he's one of 3, right?
Question,
yeah. Actually, we wouldn't know. I think, if any Catholics want to chime in, no, we have the Holy Trinity, but as an individual, he's an individual part of a. Anyway,
could he be deemed to be an individual? And then, think about the Moore decision that came down last year. Could the United States deem God's income to have been realized by U.S. citizens somewhere else? In other words, let's give you some more income from God.
There you go. Yeah, God would be deemed an individual for sure. And they're probably working on it right now. And because I got to say, the Republican bill does seem to come from another place, not from heaven. I got to say, I'm saying that it is a massive piece of turd that we're going to get into. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the basic problems that we're going to have about the Pope's income. Okay, because we don't have exactly, and I didn't want to, cite anything as authoritative because we don't actually know. I didn't see anything publicized by there, but we're going off of past stories and sort of where they are. But here are some issues about difficulty in assessing what the Pope's U.S. taxable income is. This is why it's very difficult to kind of figure this out, and an endless debate over what would happen. But here's some issues we would want to be thinking about. He lives in the Vatican, a nice place. I gotta say, nice place. It looks pretty nice. Now, if the housing is provided for the convenience of the employer, right? You might not be taxable, might not. But if it's like, it's a little convenience, but it's also pretty nice for you. Now you have to look to the fair market value of what it is that you kind of get. And I think right there would basically put, the Pope out of business essentially, because look, you could see, if the IRS came in, if they flew in, they would have to get permission to fly in. If they flew in and wanted to examine his premises, which they could. It just requires some cooperation with the Vatican to do so, which typically, if you don't, we'll penalize you beyond. So they kind of hold that over your head. Hey, if you don't let us in, we'll give you a bill you won't forget. And then we'll take your U.S. wires. We'll take those away from you too. So they have a bunch of ways to do that. So what I would say is that no matter what, the Vatican's going to be a big place and it's a nice place. So I'm thinking that no matter what, he would have, income of probably, think about it. Let's just say that, okay, a portion of his official residence is for the convenience of his employer. But, guys, what would like 8,000 square feet of the most beautiful apartment in Rome go for a month? Keith, what do you think that would go for a month? Because that would be kind of his income he's looking at.
That's very true. I don't know. I was just kind of reading about, I was sending you over some information, which I found interesting, is that the Pope technically doesn't receive a salary like a traditional job. Instead, the Vatican covers all of his expenses, including food, housing, travel, and medical care through communal church funds. He also has access to the Vatican's financial resources, including donations like Peter's pence and a small personal allowance. So who knows, just having said that, what does he have to declare on his U.S. tax?
And we're going to go through some of those other things too. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think that we have the answer very clearly from Section 61 of the Internal Revenue Code, right? Which says gross income defined. Here we go. General definition, except as otherwise provided in the subtitle. Is there an exemption for the Pope? Gross income means all income from whatever source derived, including but not limited to the following items: compensation for services. If he's getting these things in return for being the Pope, that settles the question right there.
Right there. Yeah.
There's
Okay, there you go.
absolutely no doubt in my mind that the Pope has a U.S. tax liability.
Right.
There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Right.
He owes the IRS. And that was, it's sort of like, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is that you're now the Pope. The bad news is that you've now picked up a substantial U.S. tax bill.
Oh yeah, and the compliance bill is the part that we talk about too, because oftentimes, and John, I think you said it Keith, I'm going to get to you in a second, but I just want to restrict this. Essentially, John, you said it right. Everything the Pope gets as part of being Pope is taxable income. Now the question is there some exemption that will apply and say, okay, we'll give you a limited carve out for this. We'll give you a limited carve out.
I think that there is something to do with pastoral housing and stuff like that. But whatever
is there a religious exemption? Is there any type of religious?
No, I don't know the answer to
there are special rules for
There may be, yeah, but if you take those, then it hurts your Social Security.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
But exactly. there may be some carve outs for clergy. In fact, I believe there are. Okay, but let's not lose sight of the general principle here. Okay, the general principle is that all of this stuff that he's getting in return for his service as the Pope is taxable. and then we can try to reduce it. The bottom line is that he is going to. I see no way that he's not going to owe the IRS money at the end of every year.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Now the thing is, right? Go ahead, Keith.
No, I was just going to say it's most unfortunate that neither one of us was part of the conclave, because we would have said no U.S. persons. They have really shot themselves in the foot because they did not have you, Anthony, you, John, or me, Keith.
Yeah, we could have steered them to say
anybody I think Anthony would have been enough. I don't think all three of us would have been required. Plus, he could have run a special IRSMedic podcast.
I said I'm going to do the Vatican's. I'll do all your tax compliance for a low special price.
Exactly.
Give me a few indulgences. I can't see anything wrong with that, right?
A little time off of purgatory.
Here's the thing. The issue with the Pope having to pay U.S. taxes is just, part of what it means to be a U.S. citizen. Other than highlighting citizenship taxation, the absurdity of it, that's not really a problem for the Vatican. What is a problem is the FBAR. And the reason that's a problem is that if you look at the regulation, here's what they're saying about signature, so you have to report accounts, you have signature or other authority. Here's exactly what the regulation says. In general, signatory or other authority means the authority of an individual, alone or in conjunction with another, to control the disposition of money, funds, or other assets by direct communication, whether in writing or otherwise. In other words, this extends way beyond, just having signing authority over the accounts. Now, I don't know enough about the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church, or about, the Pope per se, but I mean, let's just look at common sense. I do understand that the Pope is the chief executive officer of the organization. I get that. And therefore, I would assume that the buck stops with the Pope, and the Pope does have the authority to control the disposition of all these Vatican assets. And that, theoretically, that could be, could that be an FBAR penalty, 50% of the value?
Yeah, that would be, for each. And again, while the IRS has not done it, there's nothing to stop Treasury from assessing multiple FBAR penalties. So two FBAR penalties can wipe out everything. Everything could be wiped out for simply not filing a piece of paper. Now, what John was mentioning was the regulations. And the regulations are the things that create the FBAR, because the FBAR will say, as prescribed by what I have up on my screen. If you watch this channel, this is probably my most shared webpage right here. This is 31 USC 5314. This is the claimed authority for the FBAR. John and I have talked about this repeatedly again and again and again. We've commented on it. And Treasury knows about it. There is absolutely, and I know they know about it, there is absolutely no authority for an FBAR. When we look at the authorizing statute, and especially in the light of Loper versus Bright, the regulations have to bear some semblance to the authorizing statute. It most certainly does not. This regulates monetary instruments importing and exporting out of the United States with financial agents. That's what it does. Bank accounts do not move in transport, because if they could be more imported to the United States, they would no longer be foreign. This is completely illegal. So what my hope is maybe the Vatican would want to decide to be my client, because I am going to be challenging. I do have a client that I will be challenging the FBAR on. We're going to be challenging the authority of the IRS to assert this. And if you do something you want to contact me about, there's my email below. So I think the first problem is that there is an FBAR there, and that's what the craziness is. And if you're new, I'm seeing a lot of people hopping on today, really joining. So let's just back up here. So if you're joining us today, we're talking about the Pope's U.S. tax residency, which means because he's a U.S. person, he's a resident no matter where he lives in this universe, which could potentially include heaven. Not sure how it's defined. The point is that he is subject to abusive regulations. Now, we know this for our clients and our friends that we've been helping out through this. So we want to use the Pope's sort of being the world's most famous expat now. The Pope is the world's most famous U.S. expat. Him showing his problems and the problems of the Vatican. And these are the problems that individuals are facing. And, we looked like we had some good news going on over the fall with President Trump. campaigning, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as we get into the Republican relief bill that we were promised. But before we get to, here's some things that the Pope needs to think about and the Vatican needs to think about for what could be taxable. Okay, so besides housing, besides living at the Vatican, also meals. Now, meals for the convenience of the employer, not going to be taxable, but everything else, the fair market value of all your meals. And I got to imagine those are going to be nice meals. I'm just going to say, I'm going to imagine they're going to be pretty good. You're in Italy to begin with, and it's probably going to be nice. Medical care. If it's a Section 106 provided medical health care program, you're not going to necessarily be taxable, but we wouldn't know if he's got a U.S. plan. Of course, the diocese would have there's going to be diocese with U.S. plans. And I'm just going to assume that the Vatican has many other U.S. persons, and so they're sort of alerted this. And by the way, the Pope certainly had an FBAR filing obligation before he became Pope, as he was an Archbishop. There had to be something, and he had a territory. So I believe he probably had an FBAR obligation before that. Hopefully, the Catholic Church understands this. But medical care, and if he has a personal assistant, that's taxable. A personal assistant in Rome is going to be at least, $100,000, a nice one, that's going to be attributed as income. That means the Pope has to pay taxes on all these things, all these fringe benefits that he gets. If you added it up, I think, you'd be looking at a pretty nice lifestyle. Like, oh yeah, that'd be a lifestyle. To live like this would, easily cost, $1 to $2 million a year. So the IRS could come in and say, Pope, that's your income. You got to pay taxes on that amount. It's like, well, I don't get any money. Well, then you got to sell some of your stuff. Well, I don't own any stuff. But this is the absurdity of what we're dealing with an IRS that is this invasive. It's this invasive in America. We know that. But when you're not in America, it gets more invasive. It gets more invasive because you did the sin of being a foreign person. That was the problem. Again, as John correctly said, the United States of America hates all of its citizens, and it hates those overseas the most. Our 1,000 points of hate. Is that what it is, John? Or theory?
I don't think we were at 1,000. I thought it was only 8 or 9.
8 or 9 points.
But it does. But the problems do start with being a U.S. citizen, right? I mean that's sort of the original sin, if you will. But I think what's important to emphasize here is that number one, leaving aside the specifics, there is no doubt in my mind that the Pope is going to owe U.S. taxes. The Pope has to file these FBARs. And by the way, the real problem with the FBAR is that it reveals all the Vatican accounts, to the U.S. Treasury, right? Which, I would hope that they would, think, is it reasonable, for us to have to disclose this? But again, so the original sin is being a U.S. citizen. Why? Because the effect of being a U.S. citizen is being subject to citizenship taxation. And what does that mean? It means that U.S. citizens who live in other countries are taxable by the United States on income not sourced to the United States, right? Notice that all these things he's going to have to pay tax on, right? I mean, this is not stuff coming from the United States. It's coming from another country. So the bottom line is this, in my view. I mean, I think that this is so embarrassing for the United States, right? And, it's so embarrassing for the United States that I really think that as a gesture of goodwill to the United States, that the Pope really needs to renounce U.S. citizenship to avoid putting the United States in this horribly embarrassing situation. What do you think?
That would be very graceful. That's a graceful way to handle the problem. There's a huge problem. The United States of America is being, embarrassed and mocked and ridiculed for its completely, aggressive, depraved reporting and taxation. You can't even take a vow of poverty. You can't. Hey, look, you look, as a Pope, you're going to have to look a certain way. You have to do certain things. You can't even do that. The United States tax code won't let you do that because, hey, man, that's a nice lifestyle you have there. And we need our share, you little U.S. person. And that's what we have. Now, John, we were promised something, though. We're promised something. We're getting really hopeful. And unfortunately, and our friend Solomon he was really instrumental in this, in getting Donald Trump to explicitly, because we realized people didn't even know what citizenship-based taxation was. So Solomon said, end double taxation for Americans overseas. That's what Solomon said to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said, you know what, Solomon?
Right on.
Let's do it. Donald Trump puts out a video because of our friend Solomon Yu saying, we got to end this. So let's talk about what the Republicans have presented. Do you think the Republicans honored Trump's promise to end taxation on Social Security? Tips on overtime. Tips and overtime. Right? Tips on overtime. That's a good one. By the way, if you're joining, we're going to get to the comments at the end. So please throw your comments in. We're going to get to them at the end. We got a lot of stuff we want to get to. So we enjoy our comments. So please make sure to do that. So Donald Trump really was out there, really promising a lot in tax code. Really. And if you look at the videos that we're doing, I was pretty hopeful, but boy, I think we got to. I guess we got to move it over to this Republican bill right now from the House Ways and Means Committee. Yeah, go ahead, John.
You remember that we're still in the early stages here. Okay, we got to wait to see, what actually comes out of this, or any other mechanisms to possibly solve this problem, but. I think it would be a great thing for the Pope to call President Trump, and have a bit of a discussion, say, look, I am really, really sorry that I was appointed Pope, because, what this has done is, called international attention to a very, very serious problem of the United States and its culture and its treatment of its citizens abroad, making it almost impossible for them to live fulfilling lives outside the United States. And, I would like to work with you collaboratively, to, help explain why this is a problem and help you fulfill your pledge to at least mitigate, the effects of the problem. And what I would like to propose is that we begin by my formally and publicly renouncing U.S. citizenship. Perhaps we can have a live stream ceremony where I will renounce my citizenship in order to save the United States from the total embarrassment of publicly acknowledging that they are using citizenship taxation, FATCA, and the saving clause to come into other countries and point at people and say, well, we're going to claim you as a tax resident or you. I mean, I will help you solve this.
There you go. That is going, that is really, America is blessed after all. If we could get that, to preserve the integrity, to preserve the mythology of America, that it's not the world's worst tax regime. I mean, I think people know that, but they think there's someone else out there that's worse. I think that's what it's like. Yeah, the U.S. is terrible, but it's really no.
There's no country that is worse. In fact, the national anthem should be changed from "My Country 'Tis of Thee" to "My Country CBT."
There we go. All right, so
taxation is destiny, Anthony.
So that's right, and so here it didn't look good. The discussion of the tax bill didn't look good. What it was going, I'm like, okay, why are we not talking about this and whether or not the Hood bill would be introduced? What is going on? I think what we could safely say is this is one of the most embarrassing, horrific things imaginable. It perpetrates all the abuses of the tax code. Rule number one, what's it do? It adds more complications to the U.S. tax code. There's no question. There's no question that this does not make one thing simpler, and anything that it does, it goes in the most complicated roundabout way to make sure it keeps control. And if it doesn't like you, it can take away its carve-outs. And that's generally the way that the U.S. tax code works. And so you have to understand how any Republican, Democrat in Washington is going to look at it. Look, we want to cast the widest net. Now, we don't need everything, and people would revolt if we took everything. We want it. So what we could do is we could sell off the rights to not see certain things. So there's little carve-outs. Like, okay, we'll give you a little carve-out. We'll give you a little carve-out. And everyone pays them money. So by having the most expansive tax code imaginable, it elevates the importance of everybody in Washington, D.C., making them more valuable, more attractive to send money to. This bill does exactly what the bills have been doing. This is farming out for special favors right from the get-go. They can't do one thing in a way that isn't complicated, because if it's complicated, they do not have their opportunity. If it's not complicated, they don't have the opportunity for graft. If it's not complicated and abusive, what's in it for them? There's nothing. And so here we go. They're continuing the same exact thing, what they always do. They got a terrible name for this thing. Is I guess this is to sell it to all of us. Because Donald Trump has used this phrase, the one big beautiful bill. And so now this is, because I guess that was all something we agreed to, is like, yeah, we want that, right? Whatever Trump says is something we all want. Like, I don't know if we want one big beautiful bill. How about none? How about removing bills? That's what I want. So I don't know so here's their sales pitch. So it starts off with this sales pitch. Oh yeah, here it is. So this must be really great. Now, and it starts off with, again, except as otherwise expressly provided. It's like, oh, okay, well, thanks so much. Now, one thing I would say about this is this bill is a standalone. It's not the tax code. It's amending certain parts of the tax code. So it's very difficult to understand what it means. You have to know what it's referring, what it's modifying, to say, okay, this is actually what's happening. So, again, intentional confusion, because they want to hide what they're doing. They want everyone subjected to this, but we'll give carve-outs because that's what provides us with our meaning. So the first problem I want to get to is, really how it is, and I guess we'll talk more about, because here's the one that I haven't looked at, John. I don't know if you have looked at it, if we're ready for this one. Section 899. Have you looked at Section 899? All right.
No.
Maybe this could be an experience then, because as I was looking at this, I was looking at it yesterday. I channeled your spirit as I was going through there. So why don't we go to Section 899? Because I'm sure other people are commenting on the other sections on how they fail to deliver on Trump's promise. But we're talking about Pope Leo and, especially expats overseas. So I want to go to one section because it seems like it's a good thing. But then I'm like, well, who's paying this, John? And I think we might have the.
Is this a section that gives an extension for people who are arrested or something overseas?
No, that's another fun one too. And I wanted to close on that one because
hostages.
The hostages.
Hostages.
And that one's
all
funny
American
one.
Citizens are hostages.
All Americans, yeah. So I got to find. It might take me a little time to scroll. Let me just see if I can find. Let me just get this off. I'll do a control find because it's a long bill that even if you read it before, it's still going to take you time to go for. So it's like, all right, well, it's not easy to understand. We know that.
Anthony, I want to ask you a question. I want you to answer honestly, okay?
Yeah.
Ready? Now look up so we can see your eyes. When you read this stuff, can you read it and understand it easily? Yes or no?
Parts, but not the whole thing. There's parts where yeah.
Okay.
So I
can't.
No, I would say easily.
For a minute.
Easily, no.
Do you believe for a minute that the people voting on this have even the vaguest idea what's in it?
Oh God, no, they're told what to do. They are told what to do. They're not. Other people are telling them what to do. We don't have, we have taxation for sure. We don't have representation. No meaningful way. No meaning. And I mean, everyone knows it, for crying out loud. We all know.
So what? Tell me.
Tell us they don't read it. We know.
So why would somebody vote for this? I mean, it seems to me there's only one reason that they look and say, well, is this particular provision in there? Is that in there? If yes, I'll vote for it. Forget the rest, right?
Well, I would say there's carve-outs that seem to, when you read this, you're like, okay, this is the lobby. And I think you could find, like the music lobby got something in there for them. So you could see the active lobbying. Look, the tax code's huge, right? And, and I actually wanted to see, this actually doesn't even amend that much of it. But for one instance in there is that there's a lot of, tax benefits for the movie industry, right? Because they have a good lobby, right? Because they do a lot of favors for our government. So they get a lot of tax breaks. Well, musicians didn't feel it. So now they changed the law to say, hey, look, the same beneficial rules for movie production, we're going to give the same beneficial rules for sound recording. So, we're in good luck, guys. We might get some.
Well,
tax
what
breaks.
about a provision allowing the income of tax lawyers and tax accountants to be taxed as though it's carried interest?
There you go. Right. If we had a good lobby, we would, we'd be able to get that done.
I mean,
right?
why should anybody pay tax at all? Right. I mean,
right.
And then we have the broader question of why should any country other than America be allowed to tax an American? Right.
Why? Well, that's the part I'm trying to get to, man. It's buried somewhere here. Section 899. I got to find Section 899. I'm still scrolling down. I guess it's a. I mean, I get. Oh God, the MAGA accounts. This is just. I can't comment, but this is cringe. This is cringe. Are you kidding?
That sounds to me like a Canadian registered savings plan or something.
I think they did. They borrowed, but they wanted to call.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they wanted to borrow. So yeah, they added that,
MAGA account,
which was no one's campaign promise. I don't recall this whatsoever. But it's like, so it's interesting. We didn't ask for that. Well, hey, look, we're going to make the tax code so abusive. We're going to give you a little favor. We're going to give you a little carve out. You like your little carve out? See, we're important. We're important. See, this is a perfect example.
I assume that what this is some kind of an account where the money grows tax deferred.
Right, exactly, right. It's like,
well, there you go, right? I mean, it's another thing that ties, financial planning and that into the tax code, right?
Right. Yeah. Keeps control. Just like, oh God, the MAGA account. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Yeah.
Taxation is destiny.
Excess contributions to your MAGA account.
That's right. Ripping off the government. You can only have so much. By the way, I mean, we laugh.
Hey, you're not going to believe it.
But
John, I'm sorry. I'm still trying to find Section 899. But here it is. Failure to provide reports on MAGA accounts. See? If you don't, right, you're failing to report. Of course. Well, how could we have anything without a failure to report your MAGA? Like, well, we're going to create this thing. Oh God, it's just
okay. So Anthony, I'm going to ask you another question.
Yeah.
Like, let's say that I want you to fantasize about this for a moment, that you were an honest politician. Okay. And that you thought,
why would I be a politician? All right. Anyway,
your job was to, help your constituents, understand stuff, right? The really criminal thing about the way this works is that they never include anything of what the statute looks like after all the amendments.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah.
And, I think that is very possibly the worst procedural aspect of this, because it effectively guarantees that nobody can know what's going on.
Yeah, no, it's all by design. I mean, that's the point.
I think that what they should probably do would be to appoint Keith's Facebook group, give them the job, right? We'll call it Honesty in Tax Legislation. Using your 10,000 member group, to go around like ants, okay, and take these amendments and try to figure out what the actual tax legislation would look like after the amendments. Because, it's a massive job. I don't want to use the word mistake, but I think that this often leads to unanticipated results. Okay. Without thinking this stuff through. And I think that this is absolutely the worst aspect of this is that, it's complicated. People don't know what they're voting on, but they are deprived of the opportunity to even know what they're voting on.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
Because nobody sees what the legislation actually is, right?
All right, John. It took me, when I realized this bill is longer than I realized. It's 389
pages.
It's
big and it's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it's something else. So so on page 295 of 389. Let's get to it, folks. Here it is, John. I feel special. This feels like the first time, if you actually were able to see Elvis Presley live and it's your first time and you're going to go on and say, so here it is, I'm going to set it up for you. Cause I saw this and I thought of John, I thought of no one but John Richardson. Cause I think they were watching this channel because some of these ideas I think they got from you, but you were being sarcastic to prove a point. So here we go. Have you heard of remedies against unfair foreign taxes?
Can you put it on the screen at all?
Here you go. You go.
Bigger. I can't read it.
Here you go. Let me get it. Here you go.
Increase rates of tax on foreign persons of discriminatory foreign countries. Okay. Okay, is this somebody who discriminates against U.S.ness? Taxes other than withholding tax is interesting. In the case of any applicable person, each specified rate of tax shall be increased by the applicable number of percentage points. That sounds punitive. Next, specified rate of tax. Term specified rate means, well, I don't know, something. Or hang on a minute. The rate specified in paragraph 1 and 2. All right, so they're talking about non-resident aliens. The rate of tax, 881A. What's 881A? Well, let's not worry about that. Keep going. Let's see what they're trying to do here. All right, keep going. All right. Okay. So the application of increased rates to effectively connected income of non-resident alien individuals limited to gains on United States real property interests. In the case of this individual, it shall be reduced in excess of, I don't know. All right. So in other words, what they're doing is they're going after certain groups of people based on, but where's the discrimination? What triggers
Yeah.
it? Oh, FERPTO. Okay. Means, all right, we know what that is. Continue on. Modification of base or anti-abuse. Okay. Oh, they're really going all out here, aren't they? Continue on.
For those of you joining us live, we're looking at Section 899. John's looking at Section 899 of the Republican tax bill for the first time right now.
So, but what is it that triggers this punitive taxation?
So I think we got to go down a little bit more. And so there's the withholding taxes, right? And essentially, so what you're saying so far, this is not for U.S. expats. This doesn't seem, except, if they happen to be married to a non-resident alien, then
well, it seems to be so far. My impression is that it's playing around with the taxation of non-resident aliens. Okay, but remember now, hold on. Remember Trump saying for years, we have taxed our citizens to enrich other countries. It has come time to tax other countries to enrich our citizens. Remember? As the introduction of the External Revenue Service.
Oh, right, yeah.
Part of it. Let's continue on. Other dispositions. Jesus, God. Continue.
Yeah, this is all your withholding. Oh boy.
Yeah.
This is all your.
But what is it that triggers it?
Hang on, you'll see. It does. Any. Yeah. Applicable number of percentage points with respect to any discriminatory foreign country.
And continue on, because we don't. What does that mean?
Cap on increase.
Applicable rate. Jesus. I mean, this is like talking about how to execute somebody rather than whether you're going to execute them. Next. Continue on. Well, look. I mean. You would agree.
So there's a point system, it looks like. There's a point system, but I'm not sure if it's...
multiple discriminatory countries. Continue on. And they're really into the punishment, aren't they? Next.
Yeah. Well, John, one of John's... so if a foreign country is discriminating, then, who's paying the withhold? Well, who has to pay it then?
Well, who has to pay it is the non-resident alien who's being taxed, right? That seems to be what's going on here. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. In general,
there we go. Yeah.
Applicable person means any government. Okay. Any individual other than a citizen or resident who is a tax resident. Oh, now this is interesting. A tax resident of a discriminatory foreign country. So in other words, U.S. citizens living in Canada are tax residents. Now, I have a thought here.
All right, here we go.
Okay. So remember this Canadian underused housing tax?
Yes, we covered that. Yeah.
Right, we did. So leaving aside all the other nonsense, right? At its core, you may recall that Canadian citizens and permanent residents of Canada were exempt from the tax. Right. And they went after non-citizens who own property in Canada, specifically U.S. citizens. Now, Jesus, that seems to me to clearly discriminate against U.S. citizens, right? So wouldn't, based on what I'm reading here, wouldn't Canada be a discriminatory foreign country? Probably they're just, they may, I haven't read the whole thing, but that's where I would start looking. Is Canada a discriminatory foreign country? And if so, now listen to this. What this would mean, any individual other than a citizen or resident who is a tax resident, this opens the door. This opens the door to imposing extra taxes on Canadians, perhaps. This is so cool. Think of this.
It is really something, right? Yeah, I guess. Oh, here, private. Oh, here you go. Any private foundation. So if you have if you're a U.S. person with a private foundation, and it's in a whatever discriminatory foreign country is, we don't know what that is yet. Something's going to happen.
What this is, okay, leaving aside the details, right? This is, this is a way to, go after non-Americans for more tax, right? For various reasons. It clearly is that. All right. And I'll show you another. I did look at one.
Wait a second. This is what it got me, John. And this is what I didn't know as I was going through it. Because again, here's the problem that we have. I'm trying to figure out, well, what does this exactly mean here? Because what is it amending? So, John, do you know at the top of your head? Because when I was looking at this is what I said. Oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Any foreign corporation other than a publicly held corporation, if more than 50% of the total combined voting power of all classes of stock of such corporation, the title of vote, or the total value of such stocks is owned within the meaning of Section 958A by persons described in this paragraph. Is that a CFC? I guess we gotta look at that.
Yeah.
That's a CFC. So now, if you have a CFC in a discriminatory country and you're the sole shareholder, your corporation pays the tax. That's your relief. That's the relief you get. You get to pay more tax. That's the point.
Well, I think, this is a very interesting section. I mean, I wasn't even aware of it, of course, until you just introduced it, but I think this would be worth a separate podcast.
I think so. I think we got to look into this more.
This is definitely, but remember the principle. For years, we have taxed our citizens to enrich other countries. It is now time to tax other countries to enrich our citizens. Maybe it includes that. Now, let's see an unfair foreign tax. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay. Means an undertaxed profit rule. Okay, so here's what they're doing. Interesting. Digital services taxes diverted. Okay, so what they are doing, all right, to put this in context, right? They're going after unfair foreign tax. So Canada has a digital services tax. Forget the Canada underused housing tax. The undertaxed profit rule, that has to do with Pillar 2, but we don't even need that. Okay, diverted extent provided enact with a public or stated purpose indicating the tax will be economically be borne directly or indirectly disproportionately by United States persons. Wow. Oh my God. I mean, this is a direct, what this is, at least I think what it is, I don't want to commit to this because this is the first time saying this, but what I think this is an attempt to retaliate for digital services taxes.
But I think now what it looks like again though, to me, we'll do a deeper dive into this to find out exactly what this is about. But Keith, I know you got to leave in a little bit, so I wanted to get your feedback on this. Keith, was this something we were looking for? We were looking for some help.
No.
So and let's just be honest. There are countries that and I guess this is the complete absurdity that the House of Republicans actually put the three words together: unfair foreign tax.
I know it's amazing. The hypocrisy of it is astounding.
Well, it really is. I mean, it's over the top, but I've got to tell you that they do not understand it this way. They do not see it this way. I mean, it's a complete and total blind spot.
Well,
because we're looking at this from the perspective of the draconian U.S. citizenship taxation rules. They're not even aware that this is going on. They don't understand it. I mean, there was an article written by Brandon Michener in the Wall Street Journal.
And it was very good.
Yeah, so the article was good, but I thought what was far more interesting were the comments.
Oh, sure.
Because the comments indicated that, these people have absolutely no understanding of what's going on here. But really,
right.
When you see this kind of legislation coming out of the United States, it needs to be understood that discriminatory taxation is okay if the United States does it, but no other country is permitted to do it, right? And I wonder if, we couldn't pressure the president The government generally to understand that, it is totally completely unfair, wouldn't you think, Anthony, for any other country but America to tax American citizens?
Yeah.
Well, and that, John, and that's where I'm dying here, looking at this next section here, the extraterritorial tax. You know what's unfair? You know what's unfair foreign taxation for other countries to impose citizenship-based taxation. This is what it's saying. Like, yeah, you know what's abusive? An extraterritorial tax. Well, you're taxing things that aren't happening in your country. That's going to be abusive, buddy. You can't do that.
Well, no, Anthony, no, it's more nuanced than that. Only the United States is permitted to do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's even worse than that. I'm going to give you guys an example. Yesterday, I was watching on YouTube a First Amendment auditor. And I don't know if you know what they are, but these are people that go around and film other people on the street or in a post office because they were allowed to do so. So yesterday, I was watching a video where they were filming a gentleman going into the post office somewhere in the U.S. I think it was California. And the gentleman was not happy with the person filming him and said, "Why don't you get a real job and be a good American?" And the First Amendment auditor said, "I am a good American. Are you a good American?" And this is what the gentleman said. He said, "I pay taxes. I'm a good American." There it is, right there. Being a good American is paying taxes. That's
exactly. Well, that's actually, in 2014, a U.S. tax lawyer, is a nice guy, but I'm not going to name him, on July the 4th, posted this, and he said, "What does it mean to be an American, right?" Well, it means taxation and a belief in taxation and a belief that everybody's trying to get away with something. Okay. It's crazy. I don't believe there will ever be a culture, civilization, or country in the world that is defined by tax to the extent that the United States is. It is unbelievable.
No. Tax is the structure that keeps the United States together. Without it, there's nothing. There is no United States. The taxation is the United States of America. Here's another one that no one asked for.
Let's talk about this. This is extraordinary. Okay, this I did look at.
Well, I'm going to stop you for a second, gentlemen. I'm going to have to go. So thank you. This is very good. And I will see you next week on another exciting podcast.
All right. Thanks, Keith.
Just let people know about what I do.
And if you want to, check out Keith's Facebook group at American Expatriates. Lots of people from here, they're joining as well. And his email is on here. Where's your email? You can follow him on there. I have his email somewhere here.
If anybody's lost or doesn't know what to do vis-a-vis the U.S. tax system and needs to explore all of their options to put together a strategy, reach out.
Here we go. Thank you so much, Keith.
Okay, gentlemen, take care.
Bye.
So this is, I think, an extraordinary thing. Now, you don't have this in front of you, but if you were to look at the Ways and Means website, they have sort of an outline of the big, beautiful bill. And there's one category that is clearly aimed at, I don't know if this is the right phrase, but people who are living in the United States illegally, whatever that term is, undocumented illegals, I don't know. So they claim to, have a number of tax provisions to essentially attack that group of people, by denying certain benefits, et cetera. But of particular interest was this: remittance transfers. Now, so let's, on the most basic level, look at what this is. So remittance transfer. Now, leaving aside the technical definition of what a remittance is and how far it goes, what it clearly includes is somebody sending money from the United States, to a relative in another country, right? It clearly includes that, right? But I want to make the point that it's not limited to that. Okay, basically what it seems to be is just any attempt to move money out of the United States. Now,
Oh my God, I didn't pick up on that. No, because I was just looking at this as merely like a MoneyGram, sending a MoneyGram to a family member somewhere overseas.
Well,
Well,
I mean, we can do another podcast.
Yeah, I think
to
this would
get
need
into
one.
the details. But what's interesting about this, okay, first of all, it's clearly the beginning of wider and broader capital controls, right? Because all you have to do is change the definition of a remittance. All you have to do is change the rate. But what's interesting about this is that for the moment, at least, U.S. citizens are excluded from the tax in the sense that, they're doing this through a tax credit mechanism of some kind or another. But this is the thing, right? Now, understand that this is not an income tax. It's an excise tax. It's amending part of the Internal Revenue Code that talks about excise taxes. But also, this is after-tax income, or would include after-tax income. Okay, I mean, maybe some of it was never taxed, but it clearly would include after-tax income, right? And this strikes me as, I actually see this as the beginning of capital controls. Number one, keep your money in the United States. Number two, somehow this reminds me of going back to 1970, introducing the FBAR. So when FBAR was introduced in 1970, we could never imagine that, 55 years later, you and I would be having a podcast about it applying to the Pope and why, it's a severe, why it really makes living outside the United States as a U.S. citizen impossible. So we'll call this FBAR creep, right? This remittance, we're going to have remittance creep.
Yeah.
This is now notice how they're doing this, though. Right, they're trying to frame this as something, by God, we're going to go after these filthy foreigners, etc. But the application is way broader than that. It is way broader than that.
Yeah, well, and it looks like this is, again, to continue the theme, this is how it works, is that, if you're going to send money, we're not sure what a remittance is. Maybe we'll do a deeper dive, that you will pay an excise tax. Now you'll get a record of that. Now what this is allows you you can get a refundable income tax credit.
If you're a U.S. citizen.
If you're a U.S. citizen and right. So that's the point. So it's like, well, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you don't get.
Anthony, to be clear on this, green card holders, legal permanent residents pay this tax.
Right.
Okay. Which they're not telling you as well. Now, we can get into this in more detail. And by the way, I mean, it would take me probably 3 to 4 hours, to actually,
Yeah. Well, and I think that, and then I want to, we got to wrap it up. And the other section I wanted to get to, just because is sort of absurd. I think it's more up the top. I can see if I can try to find that later. But the section that maybe I have this written down here. What the big bill has is it's giving relief if you're held hostage. If you're held hostage, the IRS, you might get relief from filing penalties and late payment penalties if you're held hostage. Now, I think what's interesting is that made it in there because now this is the thing that's actually needed, because we've had clients. I mean, when it comes to reasonable cause and assessing penalties, being in a coma does not necessarily relieve you of your Form 5471 liabilities.
Of course it doesn't. You could have filed it before, entering coma.
Well, you could add a dead man switch to have someone do that in case something happens. So that's actually true. I have seen it firsthand. Some of these penalties, we take over cases a lot, so we see a lot of penalties assessed, and it is so beyond. And one of our biggest cases was actually a victim of a hostage. He actually was held hostage. And of course, he's a voluntary disclosure program. And of course, unfortunately, he 2 months before he came to us, he filed a voluntary disclosure. And I said, buddy, you were streamlined every which way. He said, what does that mean? I'm like, oh God, this is going to be awful. And it has been, because he made the mistake of raising his hand to say, I want to come into compliance. That was his mistake. And his other mistake was that he was helping the U.S. government. That's why he was held hostage. He was a CIA asset. And he was held hostage because he was a CIA asset. And so when he wanted to disclose his accounts that he had, that he needed to keep safe to have bribe money, because he knows that the United States government won't lift a finger to help you out. He had a bank account that he wanted to, in case he was kidnapped again, to pay a ransom. So of course, in true government fashion, he's been brutalized. And if he just got to me first, his entire family's life would have been completely different. So it's incredibly disgusting. It's disgusting what goes on, and it's disgusting that that it needed to be put in there. Hey, if you're held hostage, we're just going to call that reasonable cause. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, you noble Republicans. We have so much to thank you for. So that's the last thing we want to discuss, but I think we have a lot more, and I know John's got his wheels turning. So let's get to some comments. We have a lot of new people today. Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. All right. We got Andrew. Good morning to you there, Andrew. Nice to see you. See here. Let's see here. Anyone, something standing? Oh, Andrew, you are the common law master. You gotta give me more breadcrumbs. You gotta put more breadcrumbs here. Right. And I'd say here too, Matt, on the Pope's jet, is it used just for official use? It's like, well, now, hey, look, the most important thing in all of this, here's the most important thing of deciding what is officially a church duty and what it isn't. The only person qualified to make that determination of what is furthering the word of Christ and which is just you kind of chilling out at home or whatever is the IRS. Really, the IRS is only the organization that is able to determine what is really business related and what's personal. So that's kind of what's absurd about all this. And I'm being quite sarcastic.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think the theme is only the IRS knows for sure.
Yeah. Only the IRS knows they actually know. And I've done this video, and I know a lot of people aren't going to believe me on it, but it's true. If you look at the IRS logo, there is an upside down cross. There is an upside down cross in the IRS logo. Are some people starting to believe me a little bit more? Maybe I'm not so crazy. There is an upside down cross. Take a look at it, folks. There's a reason why. Because the IRS wants evil deciding what's right and wrong because everything's backwards, right? We should make Michael Corleone for an endowment to help out with the debt. I don't think we can do that. I mean, they'll just print more money, and I think Michael Corleone works for the Federal Reserve. So we're not looking at the foundation. Well, Andrew, you're gonna have to send me a message what you mean on that. You might be a few pay grades above me. That's kind of how I feel. There you go. Right. This bill is. Thank you, Borshell. Good morning to you. This bill is an obvious product of bureaucrats taking John's citizens. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Like, hey, this John Richardson's really an expert on taxation. Yeah, and then they had a Grok like, oh, hey Grok, get us a translation of John Richardson. Oh wow, this stuff is good. Hey, Grok, can you translate John Richardson's commentary into law? Yeah, here's the output. That's what they did. That's what I think. That's what they did. They took our, DC is for. Yeah, we got Rob. Thank you so much, Rob. Thanks for joining me today, too, Rob. DC is foreign to the United States. Legally and spiritually, every which way, it is controlled. It is who's our bigger enemy in the world? And that's the thing. Like, okay, who shut down my business? Who shut down all these businesses because of a cold? The government did, right? Who forced a bunch of people to take a vaccine? The government did. Who subjects you to all these punitive taxes? The federal government. Your number one enemy is and always will be everyone in Washington, D.C. Those who are pretending to be your friends and are your worst enemies, and they're the most devastating. They are against us, and that's why I think I mean I don't know when we're going to pull the plug on this so-called democracy or whatever it is. And it's I heard this phrase, it's equity stripping. Oh, you said this yesterday. It's equity stripping the populace as if they are slaves. Exactly, right? And that's what it does, equity stripping. That's what our government does, always pulling everything, our equity out. And then oftentimes taking our equity and deeming it, right? Deeming that you sold your equity when you didn't. Like, oh, well, here's your tax bill. Yeah, and I guess this, you know what, Matt? We're going to look at this a little bit more. And I'm kind of hoping this thing gets kind of like, hey, this is a bad. I hope it gets pulled back. I hope it gets pulled
Probably
back.
the answer to that is yes. I think that the issue is that it's leaving the country. I think that's the issue.
And then you would have to keep track of everything you
but
have, then
I
get a
don't know.
refund.
Again, this is just a very, very quick look at this stuff. But I can see the danger of, we'll call it, remittance creep very, very clearly. Okay,
Yeah.
There's no question that this is about capital control, and they're trying to, it's always, the funny thing about, well, not the funny thing, but the reality is that people don't seem to understand that these things can be used against them as well. I mean, it reminds me, in 2012, Ron Paul was seeking the Republican nomination for the presidency. And, they were talking about building this wall across the southern border. And he said, sooner or later, that wall is going to be used to keep us in. This is what he says. And everybody laughs. But I mean, the point is, he was 100% correct. Because, people will look at this and say, oh, by God, we got to go after these filthy foreigners, this sort of stuff, right? But they don't understand. I mean, the way that law is written, okay, is that it will certainly be applied to all kinds of people that they're not talking about right now. There is absolutely no doubt about it.
And the problem is this too. It's like, okay, well, they're going to give you a refund, but guess what? In true government fashion, they give you limited time.
No, it's not even that. They'll exclude U.S. citizens from that. There's no question.
Well, eventually, but as it is now, you don't want this because the government and this is the thing. Well, we'll give you a limited time to claim refund. Well, why is that?
Well, they won't go to the trouble. But don't you think, Anthony, that a useful exercise for people reading this stuff would be to ask the following question? How would I like it if this were applied to me?
Yeah.
Right, because that's where all this stuff.
Well, then I would think the other question asked is, how would I like it applied to me? And assume I did something wrong, for some reason, something didn't happen. How would I like it applied to me? And then there was a mistake, and maybe this mistake wasn't even my fault. Now, how do you feel about it? Mistake was your CPA's mistake. Well, you're paying for it. How do you feel about it now? Oh, you thought they filed the return on time to get the refund, but they didn't. Oh, too bad. You get nothing. So that's what we're doing when we're giving, this is just giving more control to DC to decide what you should be allowed to keep and what they're going to take. Essentially, they're saying we can take everything, but we can give you a little allowance. And that's what this bill is it's just, again, it's the same extension.
It's a classic carve out. It's a classic
carve out.
Look at the way it's written. It is not written, non-citizens of the United States have to do this. It's written that everybody has to pay the remittance, and we have a carve out, right? And that I think that's
and that's the way all the other provisions are. There's your taxes on tips. Again, we'll give you a carve out. We'll give you a deduction for qualified tips. We'll give you a deduction for qualified overtime. Right? That's all it is. It's the same thing of the massive net and the carve, and then paying for the carve outs. So that's kind of what we have. That's really all we have going on here. Mike's comment here. Why should any other nation tax an American? We're talking about right.
Well, ask Mike if he thinks that any other nation should be. Mike, do you think any other nation should be able to tax a citizen?
All right. We should only be abused by America. I'm an American. It didn't matter who's abusing me with taxation. It has to be my country.
Anthony, let's think about this for a minute. Americans abroad are subject to double taxation. Isn't that the fault of the other country? I mean, they could easily stop taxing Americans, and there'd be no double taxation.
Problem solved, right?
Exactly. So why shouldn't Americans abroad come together and lobby the U.S. government to do what is right, just, and equitable, and to finally resolve the most important moral question of the 21st century? That is, should any country other than the United States be allowed to levy a tax on a U.S. citizen? What do you think?
I think you got a point there. I think you got a point. Now here's my He's look at his comment here, and I just want to get something up while you do that. So Look at that. Mike says, I've seen Americans in the USA absolutely furious that other countries would tax an American living in those. It's really
Well,
something.
let's think about this for a minute, right? From the point of view of U.S. culture and U.S. policy, right? Now, understand that what makes America different, okay, the shining city on the tax hill, okay, is that the U.S. and the U.S. pretty much alone defines tax residency in terms of the circumstances of your birth and not the circumstances of your life. Now, if you view it that way, then people inside the United States, I think, could legitimately have the following thought process. Taxation is defined by the circumstances of your birth. If you're born in a country, you're a tax resident. Therefore, a U.S. citizen living in another country who was not born in that country should not be a U.S. tax resident in that country. Right?
There you go. Right. You shouldn't be allowed. Right.
Yeah.
There you go. Great. All right. And I think this could be going to be our final questions. Oh, we're getting more coming in here. I don't want to, let's see here. This is, I got to show this, John. Sorry. Going to have to do this. Peter's Cross. Well, this is what I'm going to say. I don't really think it's Peter's Cross here. But here it is. And I've done this before. So I'll show you, I'll show you the satanic symbolism of the IRS logo. Okay. And I'll explain how it works. Okay. So here we have the eagle, right? Here's the eagle. If we give the power of the upside down cross to measure what's right and wrong, we will be delivered abundance. So there it is right there. I don't see any reason why the cross, this balance, like it's like, why does it have to be like, why does the scales have this part? You know, like it seems like somebody really went a long way. And I mean, really, it's right there. It's like, give the power to the eagle and everything will be good, right? There it is. Even if you don't look at it as an upside down cross, it's still satanic even without the upside down cross. And that's my point. So there you go on that. Let's see here. State governments are just bad. Oh God. Yeah. Right. I know. Well, I think governments are the problem. And that's really where I'm at. I remember, you know, I have some Orthodox Christians in my life, and they're saying, you know, democracy, it's not really the best thing. The best thing is a Christian monarchy. Best kind of government is a Christian monarchy. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, well, why is that? Well, he said, well, Christian monarchy is going to be interested in the next generation. Whenever you vote for someone through the representative process, you always get the worst of humanity. That's who wants to do the job. And I really thought about it. That was about 2 years ago. I heard, you know what, we should just go to a Christian monarchy. I was like, wow, how did that happen? Anyway, there I was. And now I'm starting to agree with that because, you know, see, we get the worst of both worlds, right? That's the problem. The current system is the worst of both worlds. We get the worst laws imaginable, the worst laws and non-laws, and uncertainty. And as John has said multiple times, certain penalties for uncertain conduct. That's just a fact. That's just a fact of the United States of America. Certain penalties for uncertain conduct. We know that it's getting. I got a little bit distracted. John, where was I here? Talking about unpenalized.
Well, yeah, I think we're just talking about the difficulty of, you know, the political process and
right, we're talking about
changes in tax stuff, right?
And my point is this: is that you will get, you know, like this is something no one is voting for. We know this. We know no one in Congress is voting for it, and yet, when you go to challenge this law, some judge is going to say, well, this is reflecting the will of the American people. No, nothing does. This is not representation. This is not at all. You're calling it representation, but it isn't. It's phony. So when people say, well, democracy is the best form of government except everything else. Well, okay, well, show me the democracy. Show me where what you vote for is what comes out of Washington, D.C. Show me any connection between what you voted for and what you get. There's nobody who's like, oh yeah, I want a MAGA account. I want I want to carve out for this. No one. No one in the country wanted this, but for some reason, the democratic process is delivering it because I kind of,
Well, Anthony, I think that's absolutely right. And I think it might be useful to define democracy as a procedural process to determine what kind of government you have that's entirely distinct from what that government does, once elected, right? And, it's pretty obvious that these Western democracies have seen far, far better days.
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty obvious. I mean, Canada is every bit as bad as the United States in this regard. No question about it. The problem is that no matter how you look at it, we have a complete disconnect between the government and the people that it claims to represent.
Yeah.
And, and that's the problem. And, the reason for this, I think, is that modern democracies are dominated by political parties. And a political party is more or less just a voting conspiracy, right? To vote in certain ways and to keep getting themselves reelected. And this is why, you look at this, you look at what's happened with the Democratic Party, for example. You can look at particulars, but the reason that the Democratic Party is in such trouble is because they don't understand that the democratic process, it really should be about representing the citizens rather than furthering the interests of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no, that we've seen that Stockholm syndrome firsthand with the Democrats abroad. They cannot act in their own benefit. It's sort of it's pretty awful. Next.
Well, Anthony, do you think that? Well, let's say, do you think the Pope ought to renounce to save the United States the embarrassment of illuminating the problems of citizenship, taxation, and FBAR?
They're listening to this, right? Grok is gonna get them back. Like, hey, we got some ideas for you. So be careful what you're saying here. Yeah, they probably will. I mean, that would probably be better for them. But I think really the idea is that we don't have. And I think really the idea is we don't have representation. I mean, come on, folks. What more do we need? What more proof do we need? Hey, Matt, your comment here. I want you to send me an email on that. And so here's my email up here, aparent@irsmedic.com. Let me take a look into that a little bit more on your comment on the tie treaty. Treaties are always a little bit more. We have done some topics on treaty interpretation, but we always it gets pretty interesting. And the strategic uncertainty that the IRS and government has by these treaty positions that may or may not be allowed. No one really knows, right? So who knows what's going to happen? All right, so we have democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding on lunch. Yeah, and the other problem we have is this. This is the problem, the number one problem. We can't have any representative democracy or anything here because the Federal Reserve exists. The Federal Reserve is a non-constitutional body that's not accountable to the Constitution. It creates money. We don't know what it does. We don't know. We can't audit. We're not allowed to ask a lot of questions. And the Federal Reserve funds Washington, D.C. Everyone in Washington, D.C. is funded by the Federal Reserve. They're not going to want to upend the system. And so really and this is the problem that you have. The two wolves are agents of the Federal Reserve. That's the problem, Rob, that we have here. And neither. And again, did you hear anything from Republicans? Oh, we need to end the abuses of the Federal Reserve. Nope. Didn't hear that from Democrats. Nope. Both of them are 100% because they're controlled by them. And the government should, that's just never going to happen. Denton, how realistic is this? Why do people get into government, right? They want people get into government because, they like ruling over people. They might not have a lot of power in their life, but hey, look, when they go and investigate you, they can lord that power over you. That's a lot of fun.
Well,
there you go.
From their positions, right? Like Aristotle is the field version of rule by the multiple, by the property class, or even a more constitutional. Yeah, well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of So
it reminds me of you want to see an interesting speech? Look at President Kennedy's speech at the Berlin Wall, and whenever that was, 1961, I think. But it's interesting because he says, what was the quote? I think. And he was talking about anyway, something like freedom has many difficulties and democracy is, whatever. I mean, he was talking about the nuance of this
Yeah.
stuff. And of course, he was absolutely right. I mean, it's a constant struggle. But I will say this, that what I do agree with is if people in these so-called democracies are willing to relinquish, through disinterest and that control over their destinies, and this is going to get worse and worse. I mean, democracies can be the most abusive forms of government,
Mob rule,
because they can hide under the cloak of being democracies.
Thank you. Well stated. That is exactly my.
These are my observations, incidentally, from sitting here from a Canadian perspective. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't want to give you the impression that I think that this is somehow only the United States. It is not. Okay.
Right.
I mean, this is a problem right across the board. And all you have to do is look at the recent political situation in Canada as, even better examples of this stuff, right?
I don't want other people deciding who should rule over me. I don't trust your opinion. That's where I'm at.
Well,
I think you actually have my best interest, right?
I think you decide. So the question you would ask yourself, right, in a democracy, I suppose, is, whose mistakes and stupidity am I more comfortable living with, right? It's a terrible, terrible problem.
If we had a king, at least we would know who to complain to.
Well, there's no, again, democracy, I've come to see democracy over the years as a procedural issue, right? It's a procedural thing to decide, how whoever exercises the abusive powers of government is decided upon, right? And, I think it's very much, look at it this way, right? There are a lot of people in the world who think that arranged marriages are better than, what do they call love marriages or whatever, right? And many people say, well, there's no evidence that love marriages are better than arranged marriages. In fact, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
If you were to, by analogy, look at, say, a monarchy as an arranged marriage sort of thing, right? Say the United States or Canada, whatever, right? Well, let's say the United States. There's clearly no constitutional monarchy or anything like that, right? I don't see any evidence that you're better off in the United States. It's pretty clear that American citizens are among the most abused people on the planet.
Yeah, right. So, and that's the thing. And I would say our tax code is by far the worst. And it's not even close. It's not even close to anyone else. So how can we say at this point, when you get a Republican bill like this, on top of all the other nonsense for years, how could anyone say with a straight face, well, boy, it could be a lot worse?
Well, you can say it can be a lot worse because it always can be a lot worse.
Yes, true.
Right?
You're
but
right. You're right.
Problem,
Yeah, I don't mean to challenge fate either.
Yeah,
right. You're
the problem with it is that, and if you could resurrect Charles Adams, right, or the spirit of Charles Adams, is that so much of that tax bill has nothing to do with taxation. It's about using the power to tax, to reward and punish, and that's
there you go.
Right. And once you're into that, I think it's time to get out of income taxation because. That's what it's about, right? And even, this creating this mega account thing, you can say, well, in general, yeah, I would agree with the public policy objective of getting people to be financially responsible. Who wouldn't agree with that, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But what's interesting is that it appears to be, tied into some, again, I haven't read this, so I'm not 100% sure what I'm saying, but it appears to be tied into tax, this type of stuff, something to do with the tax code, right? And you want to encourage things that are completely independent of tax codes. That's the behavior, because that's the only way you're going to retain control over your life, right? If you do things only because they have a tax benefit or something, you've essentially enslaved yourself, right? To the tax system, haven't you?
Yeah. All right, we got another comment here. I know we got to wrap up. We got a lot of comments coming in here. This is, I'll just share this. This was recommended here. I'll take a look at this. Robbie's recommended this. No treason on our discussion. 1867. So I put the link in the super chat if you want to get this. I'm going to take a look at this. I'm going to take a look at this later. Sounds like pretty good. Thank you so much. I really
send me over the link by email or
yeah, I'll send you that. Yep. And again, yeah, everyone, it's in the super chat. If you're looking for that, I'll email that over to John. Oh God, yeah. So I guess we do have to wrap it up here. And yeah, hands down, yeah, right. This is the use of other. I mean, right. And I think that there's a lot of imitation going around the world. We don't like that much. The U.S. tax code is the worst by far.
Borchell. So David K. Johnston, just hang on 1 second, okay? Maybe I'll find this.
I had something to interject on that before John's getting his book there. Go back to this here. All right, he's got it. There we go. Oh, okay.
David K. Johnston is as you may know him, as among other things, a journalist. He's probably a good person if you like to categorize people in terms of their politics, but he's a very interesting and very intelligent man. He wrote this book called Perfectly Legal. Oh my God, it was a long time ago, early 2000s. And I've got to say that this is one of the best books I've ever read about the U.S. tax system and how, by definition, it sort of, creates winners and losers. And one of the points he makes very early on in the book, just want to, Borchell's comment reminded me of this. He says that in most other countries, including, the most abusive, the tax codes are far fairer. Okay. Because, they tend to be, if this is your income, this is the tax you pay, not, this incredible system of carve-outs, right? Which the U.S. tax code is. And, actually, it would be fascinating, Anthony, to get him as a guest to talk about this book. Because, I would say that Mr. Johnston is a polarizing individual, okay, in many ways. But, the stuff that he writes about the U.S., well, not but, period. The stuff that he writes about the U.S. tax code is really right on and absolutely worth reading for anybody who's interested in understanding the extent to which the lives of American citizens are run by the tax code. I mean, I was watching a video, a lecture by Warren Buffett, in fact, about a week ago. That showed up on, and you know what he says? He says, the tax code provides the rules, right? This is what he says, like right in his, he's talking about, one of the world's great, the tax code provides the rules, right? I mean, that's it right there. You need go no further. And, I don't think that, a country where the circumstances of your life are governed by a tax code, I'm not sure that's, a place that you would call a free society.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just going to tease. We're going to go, but I'm just going to give a screenshot because I looked at this very quickly to give you a little tease about the Lysander Spooner, and really where he's picking up. And this is something that we know. If you actually study the Civil War, the Union is not the good guys. Lincoln is not the good guy at all. And it's so absurd. Lincoln was so absurd, yet we're brainwashed into thinking that he did the good thing. And this is the point that very quickly getting onto, on the part of the North, the war was not carried on, not to liberate slaves. Very true. But by a government, because Lincoln was about this. Hey, look, I'll give you an amendment to protect the institution of slavery. So it was not in any way, shape, or form. That's a post hoc justification by revisionists who appreciate a large government who has all this power. So on the part of the North, the war was carried on not to liberate slaves, but by a government that always perverted and violated the Constitution. Always perverted and violated the Constitution from day one. George Washington. to keep slaves in bondage and was willing to do so if the slaveholders could be thereby induced to stay in the Union. The principle on which the war was waged by the North was simply this, that men may be rightfully be compelled to submit to and support a government that they do not want, and that resistance on their part makes them traitors and criminals. And I think that's a great place to end. Who really, the United States of America, the government won the Civil War, the people lost everything. And we lost everything. And worse, we're now believing the propaganda that the government wants us to believe, that the Civil War was a good thing, that our rights not to be ruled by tyrants, we don't have a right not to be ruled by a tyrant. And that makes us a traitor. Not the tyrant, not the criminal, not the person who's taking away our rights unconstitutionally, but rather it makes us the criminal. And I think this is a great place to start. So I'm looking forward to reading this over my breakfast. So thanks so much. Well, I want to thank everyone so much today. We couldn't get to every comment. We got to most of them. And I really appreciate the insight that we're having here. I really appreciate Keith joining us. I know he had to step off. Again, if you do want to reach out to Keith, you can go to his Facebook group right there. And again, his email, likewise. And if you are thinking renouncing, which, if any popes, if you happen to be members of the clergy looking to renounce, and you might have a tricky case, you know what? No one better than John Richardson. You reach out to him at citizenshipsolutions@proton.mail. And then myself, if it is something where you do want to get into compliance, by the way, my firm, we do just regular tax work too. You want to get your taxes filed if you're expat, your deadline is June 15th. You can reach out to my firm, IRSMedic. Just go to IRSMedic.com. You can book a time to speak with us and reach out, see what you need. And we do a lot of streamlined disclosures, a lot of penalty abatements, a lot of the things. And, we're going to be looking for your best interests, not necessarily what's going to result in the biggest fees for us. So we're actually looking to help you out, navigate what this is. And I think the difference is that, we actually know what it is. We actually know what the tax code is. I think the problem is with most of the industries, they all think this is good. They think this is politics. They think this is they actually think there's representation going on, and that what comes out, it's like, well, that's what the people wanted. How much of this wasn't even discussed in the campaign trail, but yet it shows up. How many, and if you polled the people who are going to vote on this, what's in it, they wouldn't know, right? So that's really what we have. So this is where we will sign off. And I just, again, want to thank everyone for a great view. And be sure, follow us on Twitter. I got and by the way, let me get John's Twitter up here too. Here's John's Twitter up there. You can find him at Expatriation at Law. And I'm at IRS_medic. And then Keith is at Keith Redmond there too. So with that, be sure to subscribe, follow, so that you know when we're going live. We do try to go live Wednesday mornings, but sometimes our schedules get a little bit out of control. So thank you, everyone, so much. Borchelle, you know what to say to me with that. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.